Pleasant day to everyone. My name is Engineer Dennis De Solo. Here with me is Engineer Jonathan De La Peña. We are both instructors at Parc College of Aeronautics and here to present our research entitled Operational Strategies of the Philippine Airline Companies to Sustain its Operations During Global Pandemic, Inputs for Standard Operational Guidelines. Flight cancellations in the early stages of the pandemic resulted in significant losses for our local airline industries, which were addressed by removing flight destinations, reconfiguring the cabin and seats, returning leased aircraft, and worst of all, retrenching some employees, all in order to cover daily operational costs and expenditures. As we near the conclusion of the pandemic effects and progressively regaining the position of the entire aviation industries, these effects and adjustments have had a significant impact on the way airlines operate today. This research focuses on the operational changes and strategies implemented by our local airline companies during the pandemic, as well as what our aeronautical engineers think about these changes and what they can recommend to address these current issues and develop standard guidelines if a similar problem arises in the future. The aviation industry is likely to be among the hardest hit of all industries during pandemic. Many companies have had to cease almost all operations and ground entire fleets, and many airports have closed runways to make room for aircraft parking or simply shut down indefinitely. Most companies in the aviation sector are working with minimum staffing and strict rotations. Commercial aviation is the pandemic's most badly impacted industry, most notably the Philippine Airlines and Cebu Pacific were among the victims of the devastation. So the SOP of our research, what is the demographic profile of respondents? What is the level of effectiveness of the operational strategies of the airline companies adopting the regulatory compliance and technical recommendations for the airline's facility modifications as perceived by the aeronautical engineers to sustain their operations? What is the level of effectiveness of airline companies' operational strategies that include internal airline activities such as cabin reconfigurations, layoffs, and flight cancellations? What is the level of effectiveness of the operational strategies of the airline companies, examining how the implemented strategies and adjustments influence their operational capabilities to sustain their operations? What is the level of effectiveness of the adapted sustainable systems of the aviation industry's operational strategies in order to keep their operations running? And last, what are the recommended standard operational guidelines that airlines can use as input indicators in the case of another pandemic to sustain their operations based on the aforementioned indicators? Some of our related literature, according to Applied Global Research, slow demand recovery attributed to market fluctuations and destination-specific travel and flight frequency limits have an impact on frequency planning and cost management on the operations side. According to the researchers of the study, impact of COVID-19 on airline industry and strategic plan for its recovery with special reference to data analytics technology, with a multi-step approach for the COVID-19 airline recovery plan, their findings and recommendations will give the aviation industry valuable information for preparing for the post-COVID-19 era. IATF Resolution Number 8, Item B, Series of 2020, known as the Interim Guidelines for Home Quarantine, with dedicated supervision for local airline crew, aim to address the public health emergencies in the aviation industry, specifically creating guidelines for the quarantine medical officers and guidelines for the airline crews. EASA SIP number 2022-23, known as the Enhanced Screening and Dissemination of Aircraft Services applicable to all aircraft operators involved in commercial transport of passengers regarding the cleaning and disinfection of aircraft, specifically cleaning of frequently touched areas. The researchers observed the effects of COVID-19 in the air transportation sector because of quarantine restrictions, closing of borders, and a major decrease in air travel, which resulted in mass layoffs and indefinite shutdown of some airlines companies, while some struggled to continue their daily operations. It was also observed that there are technical adjustments adapted to continue their operations and while adhering to the protocols of operations during pandemic situations. Because of this, the researchers wanted to investigate the operational strategies that the airline and the other aviation-related companies adopted to sustain their operations during global pandemic, and which of these strategies may be used to construct standard operational guidelines using the in-service experiences of the technical experts in the field, mainly the aeronautical engineers, and may be recommended if a similar case happen again in the future. The recommended strategies should address sustainability of operations and cover the financial management, maintenance, and employees' concerns. In order to determine the operational strategies of the airline companies made in relation to sustainability during global pandemic, the researchers will use the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production, or the LCSP, as the study's theoretical framework. Sustainable production, according to the LCSP, is a set of activities that is non-polluting, uses less energy and resources, but is also financially feasible, ensures employee, consumer, and community safety and health, and is productively and socially beneficial for every single working individual. Here's the figure for the LCSP. The level 5 will be our recommended operational strategies. For our research paradigm and conceptual framework, we use the IPO or the input process output model to further describe the research goals, which are to determine the airline company's operation strategies and the modifications and their effectiveness as assessed by the aeronautical engineers in the Philippines. The input variables are the responses and will be subjected to a data analysis procedure and statistical treatment. Of course, the output variables are the accepted and recommended operation strategies in the proposed standard operations guidelines for pandemic-related events. Here is our research paradigm. The research method will be a quantitative descriptive status study since it will analyze the operational strategies utilized by various local airline companies. The researchers also use an experimental approach to conduct a survey which are used to discover and describe relationships between variables without involving the researcher. The target respondents of the study will be the local aeronautical engineers working from any aviation-related industry, and the researchers use the Stokes formula to determine the target population size of 95% confidence level, yielding about 345 respondents for the total population of 2,470 aeronautical engineers from 1983 up to 2021. An online research instrument using Google Forms were distributed to the respondents' email addresses with their corresponding link to the Google survey form. The email addresses of the responses was taken from the professional organization of all aeronautical engineers in the Philippines, namely the Society of Aerospace Engineers of the Philippines, or SAE. For the statistical treatment of our study, I'll give you Engineer De La Peña. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Dosolo. So I will now be discussing our research statistical treatment. So these are the following treatment to help us in our research. First is through the use of frequency percentage. Secondly, the weighted mean. And thirdly, the variance and standard deviation. So with this treatment, we are able to get the results. So here is our research summary, findings, and conclusion. For the first statement of problem, which is determining our demographic profile, our research find that most of our respondents are of age between 45 and 49, and they are mostly male, with related experience of 30 years and above, and mostly are employed in Cebu Pacific under the Structure and Power Plant Department, working as Structure and Power Plant Engineer. So in conclusion, we find that their inputs and recommendations are very important consideration in the research. Now, for the second statement of problem, which is how effective are airline companies adopting or following regulation and technical recommendation. So the strategies that we find most effective are the following. Firstly is through the vaccination of the aircrew. Secondly, cleaning and disinfection of aircraft surfaces. Thirdly is the usage of personal protective equipment for the aircrew. Now, for the third statement of problem, which is how effective are airline strategies in internal activities. So, the top three most effective strategies are number one, to limit modification of seat plan to avoid additional cost. Secondly is through the rescheduling of engine shop visits. Thirdly is through cabin reconfiguration. Now, for the fourth statement of problem, which is how effective are airline companies in examining implemented strategies that could affect or influence their operational capabilities. So our research find that these are the top three most effective strategies. Number one is to repurpose passenger aircraft for cargo operation. Secondly is through the optimization of flight cost. And thirdly is to reevaluate maintenance cost. Now, for the fifth statement of problem, which is how effective are the sustainable systems adopted by airline companies. So the most effective strategy is through the optimization of maintenance schedule. Secondly is through the increase of cargo flights and air freight services. And thirdly is through the adjustment of flights and destination. Now, for the sixth and final statement of problem, which is what are the indicators airlines can use, to assess their ability. So, in our conclusion, our research conclusion, we found that these are the four indicators. Number one is through the financial standpoint. Secondly, management standpoint. Thirdly, maintenance and operation standpoint. And fourthly, employment standpoint. Now, here is our research recommendation. Number one is through following national and international mandates. Secondly, is through the immediate vaccination of our aircrew. Thirdly, if there is an accessibility to immediate vaccination, then airlines should proactively optimize their maintenance schedule, and if necessary, to timely reduce their number of active aircraft via risk models. Fourthly, our engineers also recommend that airline companies should also have insurance and emergency funds allocation to maintain their personnel and avoid mass layoffs. Fifthly, is through the development of new maintenance programs. And sixth is the utilization of our research ROG, or recommended operational guidelines. So the ROG can be found on the next slide. So we have the recommended operational guidelines for each airline strategies that can be adopted during or before the pandemic. And then we also have ROG for the indicators. On this slide is our reference we used for the research. So thank you so much, PARC, for this opportunity to present our research.